one source, Sports Card Nation. The hobby is the people. Sports Card Nation.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 264 of Sports Card Nation podcast. Glad to be back. Hope all is well as we approach 2024. How crazy is that? Just time is flying. Hope your 2023 was a good year. No complaints here. Had a couple bouts with some illnesses as I get older in age, but doing okay and glad to be back this week. Got a great guest. I know I say that every week, but I really feel that way all the time because anyone I have on the show, I appreciate and most likely fond of. This gentleman fits those bills. I use the two A words a lot, ambassador and advocates, and today's guest checks both of those boxes. Orlando from A Collector's Dream. Got to meet him in person at this year's National in Chicago. Got a great YouTube channel, great collection, and love about him, he shares some life stuff in with his hobby stuff, and that's something I try to do here and there as well. So whether it's him taking a page from my book or me taking a page from his book, I appreciate that he does that. And he's one of the good, gentlemen, good guys of the hobby, and probably should have had him on sooner, but on today, and glad to chop up kind of what he does, chop up some hobby. I think you'll enjoy the conversation with Orlando. So with that being said, let's get this episode started.
Iron Sports Cards is your number one source for all your PSA and other grading submissions. Their elite status improves turnaround times. Heck, they even provide the card savers. Their chat rooms provide updates on all your submissions. They also offer wax options and single cards to cover all the bases. Check them out on Facebook at Iron Sports Cards Group or on the web at ironsportscards.com, or even give them a call at 1-877-IRON-PSA. Rob's got you covered.
Are you a new sports cards collector or someone returning to the hobby? Maybe you're just looking for a friendly, trustworthy hobby community to hang out with and enjoy collecting. Midwest Box Breaks has been bringing collectors together for many years with affordable breaks, helpful threads, and a Discord group packed with generous people who genuinely care about the hobby and other collectors. Check out the breaks at MidwestBoxBreaks.com. Our goal is to bring you as much value as possible. Also, find us on Twitter at Midwest Box Breaks.
Also, remember to check out Midwest Box Breaks Marketplace for breaks, packs, and single cards from over 300 trusted sellers. Apply to sell today at iso.gg/Midwest Box Breaks. All right, genuinely excited to talk to the next guest on the Sports Card Shop guest line here on Sports Card Nation. Met him in person for the first time at the recent National in Chicago. He's a content creator in his own right, and he's got one heck of a collection. We're definitely going to be talking about that, but the more I talk, the longer it takes to get him on here and going. So, Orlando from A Collector's Dream, welcome to the show.
Hi, John. Thank you very, very much for having me. I've been listening to you and watching you on YouTube for a long time. And it was awesome meeting you at the National.
Likewise, no doubt. And, I like to throw the two A words out a lot. Not the bad A word, but the two good ones, ambassador and advocate, right, of the hobby. And you personify both of those words. You do a great job. You have a passion for this hobby, for the cards, and not many people I'd put ahead of you, if any, when it comes to that category. And a great collection, like I said, as well. Enjoy seeing it when you share it on social media, on your YouTube channel. It's kind of, this is your first time on the podcast. It's kind of the boring starter question, if you will, but, take us back to where it all started for you. How did you get your start in the hobby itself?
Well, it goes way, way back. I was born in Cuba, and baseball was big in Cuba. It was just probably as big, or to me, it seemed the biggest thing back then when I was a little kid. And, unfortunately, we were forced to come to this country due to the communist state. And we ended up here in Miami, and ended up going to school here, and meeting some great kids, and played little league, and then just a big baseball fan and little kid playing baseball, and then met up with kids that had baseball cards. So I started getting into that, and just there were 4 kids that collected cards at the time, and this was in the late 60s. So they had cards probably from 67 to 68, 69. And I remember starting opening packs around that era, and putting my first sets together in 1970. I put my first set together from packs, and I went on to do that every year from 70 to 75. And then I kind of left the hobby at that time, high school, college, came back probably 8-10 years later. I was in my mid-20s, and just had moved, and my mom called me, said that my dad had found my cards, and to come and get them. So I was living in Tampa, drove back to Miami, picked them up. Then I had just had kids, was married, and started getting back into cards. And when I looked at all the cards I had, I had literally shoe boxes full of cards all the way from 1968 all the way through 1975. I was able to build all the sets from 70 to 75, and I started just kind of going to they had little mall shows at the time. That's basically the only shows that were available. And I don't remember what it was, maybe $30 to get a table. So I got all my doubles together, because I was a set builder at that time. That's pretty much what we started doing. Got all my doubles together. I ended up that I had 2 Nolan Ryan rookies in there, and a bunch of other cards, great cards, and kind of put them out just on the table, and started selling a little bit and buying a little bit, because I was a Mickey Mantle fan, so I wanted to get some more Mantles. That was the time when I kind of was at the end of his career, was when I really got into baseball, and when it was just the biggest guy at the time. So, and I went on from there. I was a part-time dealer for many years, bought and sold a bunch of stuff, and started, really as a collector. So I was selling stuff, buy cards that I really wanted, and I went back to collect some of those Mantle cards that I always wanted. Eventually, I built my the Mantle run, and I did have them all graded. Almost every one of them was raw at the time, and I did that and continued on just collecting sets from then on, just as a regular collector and part-time dealer. Did a little more shows. I did go to the National in Atlanta in 1992, and I did a lot of stuff there. I took a lot of cards, and I did a lot of buying and selling over there. And I got to meet a lot of people like, Alan Rosen, Mr. Mint, and a few of the guys, Alan Hager, and people at that time that were into a lot of the vintage and pre-war type stuff. And I just began to study more and learn more about the history of not just baseball, but baseball cards. And I got into that. And, it just, the fire was fueled because here locally in Miami, we had a couple of teams that played here, and in Fort Lauderdale was the Yankees, which I would go see spring training. Of course, that was the team that I liked, and the Orioles played in Miami. And so those kind of became my 2 favorite teams that I would go see. And my dad, he unfortunately had to work 2 jobs because we got here, we didn't have any money, and my mom worked 2 jobs. So my grandfather and grandmother kind of took care of us for the most part. And then my friends, that his father was a Little League coach, I hung out with them a lot of times, went to practice and did all that kind of stuff. But, so eventually I started, I built a a good collection. And, in those days, you kind of collected by yourself, basically that's kind of what it was. And just kind of learning more about the history took me back. But I was saying that when I went to spring training, I guess my biggest thing that really gave me the biggest boost was when I met Brooks Robinson there. And Brooks Robinson literally took me, as a kid into the dugout after the game, because in those days of spring training, I mean, you could kind of go right up there, right by the fence there, and talk to the players right after the games were over. And what happened was that my grandfather knew one of the pitchers for the Orioles at the time, Orlando Pena. My grandfather sponsored a baseball team. He owned two small local supermarkets in a small town, and he sponsored a local team in Cuba. And one of the players was Orlando Pena. So when he came here, he remained in contact with him, and we would go see the Orioles. And one day we got a foul ball. My grandfather caught the foul ball. After the game, we went down. Orlando Pena, signed the ball, and he said, "Who's your favorite player?" And I said, "Brooks Robinson." So he called Brooks over, and Brooks took me and my grandfather into the dugout and had other players there sign the ball. Jim Palmer, Al Bunbury, Paul Blair, Boot Powell, and a bunch of the other Oriole players that were there at the time. And, that really, just talking to the players in person and just being with them in a dugout when you're, just a kid. I was probably, 12, 14 years old at the time. It was just a thrill. And that really just kind of fueled my collecting. And I've been collecting ever since. I've been collecting literally now over 50 years. I'm retired now, over 65. And I stopped being a dealer probably about 20, maybe 30 years ago at this point. Yeah. When it really, in the mid 90s, 1990s, when things got crazy with all the products and everything started getting a little, it was just the junk wax. And then it was just a bunch of, it was just went crazy and prices went crazy. Kind of like we just faced, this past COVID era, the era. I call it the COVID era. It's the same kind of similar as the junk wax era. So I kind of stopped being a dealer at the time and focused on my collection. And because I love the history of the sport and the cards themselves, I went all the way back to pre-war, and I started collecting pre-war cards. At the time, went all the way back to cards from the 1800s. And I just found those to be just such, beautiful cards and just such stuff that I didn't even know that something like that, could last, 130, 140 years, and it still survived. And they weren't made to be collectibles. They were made for just kids to have them, and not really kids. They're actually for adults because they came in cigarette packs. They were made to be, it was a marketing scheme to be, so people would smoke more cigarettes. They put those nice little cards in there, and they also to stiffen up the pack of cigarettes so they wouldn't bend. And whoever thought that they were going to be collected, and they're collected because they're rare. And anytime you see stuff that says it's a collectible, it's not a collectible, because people collected it. But some stuff like this, I just interesting. And then going back to the old Judge, and then the set that really fascinated me the most was the 1888 Goodwin Champion set. It's such a beautiful set that they still bring back Goodwin Champion cards today, because it was one of those cards that were an exam. I know you can't see it on the radio, but this is the card of King Kelly that I'm showing, and it's a beautiful full color artwork type card. That something that in the 1800s you wouldn't think would be produced, and it literally it was full color artwork that was done by hand. And in those days they were craftsmen, and it took them weeks to create a card like that. And those are the things that just fascinated me. And then the T206s and the T205s with the beautiful gold borders on those cards, and just beautiful cards, beautiful quality of stuff. And it got to a point John, and I know I'm talking a lot, but
No,
you
go
want
ahead.
you
I'm enamored, but yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. So I, I got to a point that once like I said earlier, I was a set collector, and once you build sets from the '60s and a lot of the '50s sets, because I built the 1953 Bowman set, the '54 Bowman set, uh, the almost complete 56, and then the whole '57 tops, '58 tops, '59 tops, and so on. And I had most of the '60s sets built. And once you attend a lot of shows and you see a lot of stuff out there, you realize that a lot of the cards from the '50s and '60s, you know, they're they're around. I mean, they're not rare. You know what I mean? You see them. The rarity comes when you find high grade cards of those years because they just didn't survive. We didn't have sleeves, top loaders, or anything like that in those days. So, a lot of those were in the bike spokes and they're in bad condition. So, find mint cards of those years. Those are the rarities. But really, if you want to find, let's say a '59 Clemente, you go to any show and you'll probably find one in the table. Maybe a few in the table. You go to eBay and you'll find, a bunch of them. Take your pick. So, from many years of being out there and being a collector and being in the hobby for so long, you see all those cards, and I got to a point that there was cards that I needed, I couldn't get, I could never afford, and I had to sell some of those cards, and that's kind of what I did. So I ended up selling a lot of my cards and my sets and things like that. Of course, I kept the mantles and a few of the other stuff, but that's how I was able to get some of the cards from the 1800s and some of the cards that I really always wanted in my collection. I've always wanted a card of Babe Ruth, and I was never able to afford one. But through selling and consolidating and upgrading your collection, that's kind of the way that I had to go about doing it. I felt, if I ever want to go back and get a '59 Clemente, yeah, I can always buy one. But if I want to buy a 1928 Harrington's Babe Ruth, it's not that available. So I took that route, and and I do have three Babe Ruth cards. I don't have the Gaudy Ruths, but I do have the American Caramel and a couple others. And that's the kind of that's where my collection kind of went towards that direction, from having a lot of sets, a lot of stuff from the '50s, '60s, and '70s, to selling the majority of that and moving pre-war, and picking up a 34 Gaudy Lou Gehrig card that I've always wanted, and picking up a 49 Leaf Joe DiMaggio, and something like that versus your regular 1965 Bob Gibsons.
Yeah, a couple things to unpack there. You told the Brooks Robinson and Orlando Pena story. It's just a great time in baseball, right? The players were more approachable, personable, like you said, brought you in the locker room. Not as much of that today. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's players are sort of different. And my dad on this very show talked about growing up in Brooklyn and Ebbetsfield and meeting the Jackie Robinsons and Duke Schneiders and Roy Campanella and Pee Wee Reese, and they'd shake his hand as a kid and say, "Hey, are you doing good in school? Are you doing your work? Are you studying?" And that sort of stuff. I love those stories because it just shows you, the fabric of baseball and how personable players were. And I'm not saying that they still aren't. It's just not to that level anymore, just with time constraints and more of the money side and agents and commitments and exclusive signing deals. As it's a kind of a different era with players, and I'm not blaming them so much. It's just the sign of the times, so to speak. And so that story for a 12 to 13, 14-year-old Orlando really shaped how you felt about baseball and collecting, and sort of opened that door. And here we are, like you said, you've been doing this 50 years, and I'm in the 40 years of collecting, and I appreciate hearing you talk about, what I call the COVID crescendo, right? For me and you and others who have been in the hobby a long time, I think we probably were surprised, but we also knew just from our time kind of served and things we've seen over all these years, we knew the music would kind of stop too, a little bit, or slow down. That's stop's probably not the word. Like, oh, things are going to settle down, and we weren't going to get caught off guard by that when it happened, which we're in the midst of. Certain other people who don't have all that history to refer to probably caught them maybe a little more off guard and maybe affected their perception of the hobby. Maybe some aren't here or partaking in the hobby anymore. Me and you are in it. I think it's safe to say for the long haul, right? We've already been. We're not, it's too late now. The point of no return. But I appreciate that perspective, Orlando. And the other thing I appreciate is, talking about your YouTube channel and your perspective. One thing I love about you is a few things. Number one, you make it a lot about your cards. But the other thing I like too, you put some life in there too. You share, hey, look at this scene, or some animal. Like it's cards, but it's not just about that, right? There's other life in general, right? While we may share that common thread of being collectors, there's also beauty in everyday parts of life, and you do a good job of sort of sharing that. I get jealous when I see some, here in Syracuse, New York, and it's December here, and in the 20s and 30s, and we get some white stuff called snow. And I kind of live vicariously through you. I did live in Fort Lauderdale actually for 2 to 3 years, so familiar with the complex there for the Yankees minor league park. I've been to the stadium in Miami too for them, and but you get to see, we don't have spring training. We do have the AAA Mets, and I'm a Mets fan, so I'm not. It's not all bad, but sort of live vicariously through you. But love how you make the tagline for the show, Orlando's the hobby is the people. I think you agree with that, but you also you keep the focus a lot on the cards, which I think says a lot about you as well, and those experiences that you share, right? That why you're here 50 years and what you've learned, and we're still learning, right? I don't care how long you stay in the hobby, been in the hobby, we learn stuff every day. And I always tell people the minute I don't learn, I'm not paying attention or I'm not doing my homework. And, I think that's important. And another thing, you care about the history of the game. And even going back to that pre-war stuff. I mean, neither one of us were obviously around back then, but I always say it on this show, those players bridged to the 20s and the 30s, and those players bridged to the 50s and 60s, and those players got us to the 80s and 90s, and those players got us to where we are now. And the history of the game, and I think baseball, of all the sports, really appreciates, and the fans and the players themselves, I think, appreciate that history. I think it's important to everything, but I think for baseball, even more so. And you care about that. You share
for
that
sure.
insight. Yeah, go ahead.
John. I mean, really, one of the things about baseball, to be on a baseball card, I mean, you did something. You were an important person back then. Even just to be, in baseball today, I mean, it takes a lot. But back in those days, every single one of those players have a history, and I like to share some of the history on some of those players, because there's a lot of people that really people have forgotten about, I mean, important players in the history of baseball, players like, even recently, Curt Flood. People don't talk about Curt Flood and the accomplishment that he did, and how he opened
Free
the
agency.
doors.
He opened the door for free agency, and we know in today's game how important free agency is. There there is no off season in baseball.
Yeah.
There's when the games are being played, and what we're in right now, where teams are trying to build their future with signing and trading and shaping their team. And a great point too there, Orlando. Kurt Flood, may not be in the Hall of Fame. Some will argue he probably should be based on his contributions. Even besides on the field, but to free agency, as you pointed out.
Yeah. And as I go back in history, and it's funny because one of the players that I like to collect Cuban players or cards from Cuba, and those cards, a lot of them are difficult, and a lot of those players are difficult to find because most of them played only in the Negro leagues for the most part. But there were some that did play in the National League here, and one of them was Armando Marsans. And the thing that people don't realize about Marsans that he came in 1909. He started playing. He played with the Cincinnati Reds. He played 8 years in the league, and then in 1914 he wanted to go and move to the Federal League. And it was different in Cuba than it was here in the States, even back in those days. I mean, you're talking the early 1900s, 1910s era. Back in blacks and whites played together in Cuba, basically, in that era. All the blacks that could not play here in the United States, they went to play in Cuba. That's where they had to play because there was no other player that they could play professional ball. And then, they came here, played in New York Cubans and things like that. So Armando Marsans was one of the, white players that came here along with Rafael Almeida and later on Adolfo Luque. So he came here and he wanted to move to the Federal League, but he couldn't because of the contracts and the way that it was set up here and the Reds and the management and the stuff like that. So he was kind of blackballed. He had to go through court. So the first major court fight for free agency was in 1914, and it was called the Marsans case, and it was for Armando Marsans. And that year he had to play for 3 different teams. Eventually he ended up winning his case, which kind of opened the door for other cases in the future. And then, of course, later came the Kurt Flood, and that opened the gates wide open.
Yeah, no doubt. And then for the modern game in Major League Baseball, and it's those stories right there, Orlando, right? Many people don't know that, and now they do if they're listening to this. And important, right? Not a home run. It's not a game-winning World Series hit, but it's equally as important to the fabric and history of the game and what comes after those kind of things to opens the door for other players. They can point to Marsans, as you pointed out, as, hey, now I can do something that maybe before wouldn't have been possible. And those kind of stuff and the fact that you care about it and share it, I think, again, speaks volumes about your love of the game and the history. And I think it's important. I think that stuff like that is contagious. I think certain people can gravitate towards that and share it. And that's how, those guys are not here with us anymore, but their stories and their legends live on through the sharing of history. Right. And that's not just baseball. That's just life. And I think it's important for those of us that do it to do it as much as we can, because that's how how people learn, and then they tell the next generation of fans and people, and it continues to and it's important. Besides being a story, it's an important a story, and I definitely appreciate that about you and your content. Like I said, you're sort of put the focus on the right things. You mentioned, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to tie on the reason I started my channel is, many people like me collected alone for a lifetime and never shared my collection. Even my family really, they knew I collected, but they didn't have an idea exactly of what I had, And I thought that, and my dad passed away a couple of years ago. He was the one I shared most of my collection with. And, I said, life hits you, and you say, uh-oh, my dad passed away. So I said, I thought about it. I talked to my daughter, and my daughter is someone that's technically can do all that stuff. So she set up my YouTube account, and I did it really to document my collection, to let her and the rest of my other son, my family know what cards I had, and just kind of share that and talk a little bit about the card so they would understand, what I collected, why I collected it, and explaining the card itself. I mean, I don't talk about prices in my videos at all. I really don't even show my face in my videos. It's all focused on, the card and the player and what he has contributed or to the history or whatever I can share about that player or that card is what I tried to do, and that's kind of how I started my channel. And it just kind of it just, I don't know, it's just incredible that I'm just showing cards and talking about cards, and people are subscribing, and I got a lot of shout outs from a lot of guys. And when I went to the national in Atlantic City, I met so many people, and then I got so much shout out, and all of a sudden, make a long story short, I got over 2,000 subscribers.
Well,
Like crazy.
listen, that's a testament to you, Orlando. I know you're not going to so much give the credit to yourself, but I think it's what we talked about. It's your passion, you caring about the history. I think like-minded people sort of gravitate to that, appreciate that. Even people who may not be like-minded, at least initially, right? You open that door up for them. I'm like, hey, this is important. I didn't, till I heard Orlando say that, I had no idea who that person was or what he did and why it's important, even though it's 123 years ago, or 130, why it's important now. It set the groundwork for what we have today that we sort of take for granted. It's just we wake up and like, hey, who signed here, or who got traded here, or who went to Japan and is playing there now. They left major, it's those folks that did it way back when that you're highlighting that that happens today because of that.
Time for a quick break, but we'll be right back. For more than 30 years, Robert Edward Auctions has been the nation's premier auction house, specializing in sports memorabilia and trading cards. With significant experience and expertise in all major sport, non-sport, and Americana collectibles, REA has helped clients achieve record-breaking prices for their items and has done so with a reputation for integrity and transparency. By actively partnering with collectors and enthusiasts throughout the entire process, REA has created the hobby's most trusted forum for selling high-quality collectibles. Go to robertedwardauctions.com for more information on how to buy or sell in their next auction. Sports Card Nation has returned.
And there's a Sandy Koufax rookie.
I'll I look at something like a Sandy Koufax rookie who's already accomplished, already established, and those are the people that I really want to focus on, because it's just who knows what's going to happen. I mean, look, if you really take a look at some of the new blood that came into the hobby, it's great and it's not so great, because there's a lot of young people that came in it really for the money and for the flipping of the cards. And that really was what really attracted so many. But if you start looking at now at some of those YouTube videos, where are those flippers now? The guys that would come in and, I just bought $10,000, $15,000 worth of cards and flip them tomorrow. And I don't want to name names and stuff, but we all know who they are. And they were all over YouTube. They're gone. And I think, it's good and bad. You don't want to see people not be successful in the hobby, but I think it's great for the collectors, because what I've noticed is that a lot of those guys, even uh, vintage, a lot of those had some vintage cards, but they really were not collectors. They had the cards and they were just had it, holding it until they were ready to sell. And I think what's happening now is a lot of those, the modern flippers, they're all, they can't make it, and that's why you've got all the rest of the repacking, all that issues going on. But the cards took a little dip, even vintage, because a lot of people are kind of soured on the hobby as far as investment. As far as an investment, they kind of soured on the hobby when the hobby was never about investment in the first place. But that's what they made it for clicks or whatever. So they soured on that end of it. And John, this is the best time for a collector. The prices have come down, they've stabilized. Even cards. And I don't regret selling cards, because I really, I can't look back and say, oh God, I wish I would have kept this card, because I look at what I got when I sold it, and I got another card that I really wanted more. So, but as far as regret, yeah, I'll say that I sold all my Jackie Robinson cards, and I intend on getting some back. But
Well,
I
listen,
sold them.
I'm gonna make you feel a little bit better here. Hearing you say that, as you probably know, I'm a Jackie Robinson guy myself. I've always collected them. Um, I've told the story at nauseum that I never acquired the Leaf very early on. It was dumb on my part. No one else to blame but myself. Had numerous opportunities and just always thought, well, I'll get it next time, or I'll get it next month. And it was always, I'll get it another time. And I kept kind of kicking that can down the road. And then that rise happened with what we saw with a lot of vintage cards, and specifically even that one, as you know. Eventually got it. It's over my shoulder. It cost me not that it's about dollars, but my dumbness, it cost me more out of my bank account than it would have had I just been smarter and bought it in earlier times. And so those are the lessons we know. But I've sold some Jackies too. I don't have,
Yeah.
everyone thinks I have like I have the run. I actually don't. I have a percentage of it. There's others I don't have. I don't have a bond bred Jackie Robinson. I don't have certain other ones like you. It's on my list to sort of
Mhm.
fill in those blanks. Hopefully someday,
Yeah.
I have enough time to do it. And but so don't feel like you're talking to a Jackie guy who's done the same thing, right? So we
Yeah.
do. As a dealer myself, I still do shows, right? You mentioned flippers. I want to kind of talk about. I've always said hobby your way. While I'm not a flipper, and I may not do that, and it's not my thing, the transactions they were doing are important for the
Yeah.
hobby. Um, I think it's better to have someone. I think you'll agree with this too, Orlando. I think it's better to have someone come into the hobby and stay for the long haul, like me and you have here. Just speaking with us because we're on
Yeah.
screen, but a lot of others too. I think that's more healthier, if I may be so bold. But people, anytime there's money involved, it's not just cards. It could be stocks, it could be sneakers, it could be Beanie Babies back in the day. Whenever there's a hobby or a collectible or an industry, not even that a quick buck can be made, you better believe people are going to do it. It's not my thing. It's not your thing. But I also, those transactions are important for
Mhm.
the health of the hobby. I think it's healthier if those people stay for the long haul rather than get in quick, get out
Right.
quick. But to each their own. I definitely understand what you're saying there. But I knew early on as a 7-year-old kid opening that first pack in 1979 Topps baseball and pulling a Reggie as the third or fourth card in. I didn't know what I'd be doing today, whether I'd be a dealer or doing, podcast wasn't even a thought even at that time. But I knew as a 7-year-old kid, Orlando, that I was going to collect cards probably for the rest of my life in some form or fashion, you know. And then at 13, I was at a card store every day, and the owner, Rudy, said, "Hey, you're here every day, John. I need help. Why don't you just work here? You're already here anyway. Might as well just make it official." And so I got to see sort of the business side of things, if you will. I was already in it, not for the business side, but that experience helped me, where I built up a nice collection. And my friends said, "Why don't you set up it and do a show yourself?" And I kind of resisted at first. And then I kind of succumbed to peer pressure. And you make a good point, right? We sell things so we can buy new inventory. Those transactions are important. Sometimes there's a negative connotation on people who sell cards. I don't understand that, because we have, if you buy cards, someone has to sell them to you. You just don't. It's not a machine with no one behind it. It's a person. So I don't always get that, but it's those transactions that allow us to buy new inventory. In your case, some Babe Ruths you finally could acquire by moving some other stuff. Maybe you were a little less fond of. You enjoyed them, but you kind of, like you say, you leveled up. There is no bad Babe Ruth cards, by the way. But so all those stuff is important. But I think the long term, if the more people stay in the hobby for the long term, I think the healthier the hobby.
Definitely. Definitely, a lot of new people came into the hobby and are still coming into the hobby, and that's exactly what we want. But we want to develop those new people coming in and get them to become collectors, because ultimately every card that is printed by Topps, Paninis, whatever, Fanatics, it's going to end up in a collector's hand. It's just how many hands does it have to go through, those type of issues. So really, if the more collectors, that's how you expand the hobby. More collectors. And for me, for example, I would like to see people say to kids, here, I'll give you $20, but with that $20 you cannot buy a pack of cards. You've got to go through those dollar boxes and pick out cards that you like from the dollar boxes. That way they get to see cards for different years, different players, different things, and not really try to oh, I didn't get the hit, dump them the cards, and they trash them when they don't want them. And how many of these breakers you see dumping all these commons everywhere nowadays?
Well, heck, I'm sure you've seen it. You walk around the National, look in the garbage bin. I'm not saying to be, but sitting right on top is going to be a bunch of cards that people just tossed away. And I always cringe when I see that, and I'm like, as a kid, I would. I got most of my cards because my friends wanted my gum and I wanted their cards. So I gave them my gum and got more cards. And that's how I amassed the collection I did. Now I still got cavities. I just got them. I got cavities from drinking soda rather than chewing the gum. So we all wound up at the dentist office anyway, just different paths to get there. But whenever I see that, I'm sure you've seen that in your travels, maybe whether it be the National or even other shows, right? You see those cards just kind of tossed away because they're, like you said, they're not that big hit. They're not the chase card. And I always find it sad because I think back to 7-year-old me. I would not want to see any cards thrown away. Like if someone was throwing away the cards and I knew, hey, I'll take them, give them to me.
No, it's
go ahead.
It's crazy. I see it all the time. And, on my channel, one of the things that I do is I visited all of the local card shops in the counties within really a 4-hour drive of me. I visit all of those, and I've also attended almost all of the card shows, and I do go to at least one card show every month. And you see these kids, I see a lot of them with the Pelican cases walking around and stuff, but what you see them doing is trying to sell, cards nowadays. And it's just, to me, I don't see that as the hobby. And you see a lot of, right there, if it's an open table, you'll see teenagers or young collectors go and lay down a box and start ripping wax right there, right at the card shows. And yeah, you're right. They just leave them there, and it's crazy because that's just not what I would do. We used to try to build the set with the commas. We used to trade. I remember back in the day, I traded good players for common players because I need to finish that set. That's the way we collected, and you're never going to go back to that. People have kind of moved on further and stuff like that. And even myself, I'm not a set collector anymore, and people. It's too difficult to build a set even nowadays to parallel set whatever. So my theory, I mean, the way I built my collection, basically, John, is just patience and focus. And with all of the noise that you get from around you, collect this, do this, follow that, the new product, everything's coming out. I've been still focused, over all these years as to where I'm going, the direction of my collection. And, it's been, I changed my direction a little bit and changed my focus some, but, I'm focused on, of course, I said pre-war and pre-war Hall of Famers and things like that at this point in my collection. And I stick to that, and the problem with most collectors is that they just open too much and go into too many different rabbit holes. And then later they realize, I don't really want this, or I don't want that. And they buy too much stuff, too many things they really didn't want. And sometimes you miss out on what you really wanted because you spent your money on something else and didn't get a chance to get to that. So patience is the key. I mean, I don't buy a lot of cards during the year. I purchase wise, I think I bought, 4 pretty big cards, and the rest has been fairly small. But I have picked up some good cards trading with people, and that's one of the things that I found, not just at the National, but with other YouTubers, and that's one of the things that helps out. Trading with just people that know what you like, and I know what they like, and we end up doing some trades, and it's helped out a lot. But as far as collecting, you really got to be focused and stay focused as far as where your collection is going to go. And if you're looking for a particular card, and it's a card that is pretty available, let's say, that you can probably find them on eBay, take your time, find the right card for you. If you like registration in the card, find one that's really well registered. If you like centering, make sure it's the one that's going to be centered the way you want it. If you like the sharp corner, whatever it is that you're looking for in that card, if you're going to buy one, and I'll tell you, I'm going to be looking for a Jackie Robinson at this National coming up, and at Strongsville too, by the way. And I sold mine. The prices went way up. I was able to pick up something and sold them, thank God, at the right time. But now they've come down a little bit, and I think that I'm going to see if we're going to work out something. But going back to what I was saying, is just find the right card for you. Don't just jump on eBay and I'm going to get one today, and this is the one I want, and whatever. Take your time. You'll find the right one. I was looking for a 52 Topps Mint Minoso for probably 2 years, and I finally found one that was nicely centered, because the 52s are tough to get centered. Nicely centered, nice color, great registration, and it was graded a 5, but it looked like a 6 or a 7. And that's the one I ended up getting, because when you're talking with vintage, it's all about the eye appeal. And don't focus only on the grade. Really take a good look at that card. And what can you live with? Vintage cards are all going to have a flaw or a couple of flaws. What can you live with and what can you not live with? Because if you buy a card that you can't live with, eventually you're going to say, God, I really shouldn't have bought that. It has that crease there that it just I keep looking at that crease, So that's really my focus. That's my advice to everybody, is take your time. Once you decide the card you want, take your time. Don't rush into it. Don't jump. Find the right one for you that's going to make you happy with whatever criteria you decide is what you want.
Those are all great points, Orlando. Just want to kind of unpack some of that, right? I'm guilty of this myself, right? One of my early mistakes with collecting Jackie Robinson is I wasn't focused. I was sort of scatterbrained, or not locking in to just, hey, buy this. Now you have that, buy the next one, especially when prices, like you said, were a lot lower and then they crescendo. They have come back now, which is a great opportunity, right? I talk about this all the time on the show. Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. As a dealer, when I'm comping some of my stuff to put out my showcases, and I got to take out that price gun and lower some stuff, it is what it is. I don't complain too much about it. I've done this long enough. I've seen it time again, so I'm used to it. Maybe someone who's new as a dealer will have more growing pains with that. It's sort of old hat for me, but as a collector, it's a great opportunity to acquire some cards that before were out of your grasp, and now they've kind of come back into budget restraints, and it's a great opportunity for me even to pick up a couple of those jackies that I don't have as of yet, like you mentioned. It's a great opportunity to do it now. So I'm sure you get asked. I get it. Is the hobby ever going to rise up again like it was? It's maybe not to that level. I think that was sort of an anomaly with COVID and people being home and some surplus income and some help with the government giving stimulus checks. And so it was all those ingredients, and that led to the hobby sort of booming. It's going to rise again, maybe not to that level, but higher than it is now, right? Timing is so, this more than anyone. Timing is so important. Like, I hate to say it like this, but when it does rise again, sell some stuff you're not super attached to, and then when stuff sort of settles down, use that profit, if you will, to buy stuff you're more looking for, more attached to, and kind of that timing is so key. And for me, it cost me more money because when I should have bought the Jackie Leaf rookie, I just kept poo-pooing it and kicking the can down the road, just thinking, I'll get it next week, next month, 3 months from now. It'll always be there when I'm ready to make that purchase. And found out the hard way that's not always going to be the case with every card. Maybe some cards fit that classification, but not all of them. You can't paint the whole hobby with the same brush. So, you learn from mistakes. I make them. I'm sure you've made them. That was one of mine. And you learn, and the older you get, hopefully, you get more knowledgeable. You figure, things start to slow down, and you figure things out a little more than maybe the younger version of you did when you think you know it all. And then the older version says you never did. You thought you did, but you didn't. And I still don't, even in my advanced stage. So those are all important, right? And you make another point, right? Find a version or a copy of a card you're looking for that you're going to be happy with, even if it means, you're at a show and you're looking at the card, it just doesn't move your meter enough, don't be scared to walk away and not buy it at that moment. I talk about the opposite of that. When I should have bought the Jackie and didn't, there's two sides of the coin. Sometimes, the purchase you don't make at the time pays off in the long run because you find a copy you're truly happy with, and maybe not one where you have buyer's remorse. Like you said, maybe there's a defect. It's not centered. You keep looking at it and it just kind of gets to you and whatnot. So be selective, right? And, like you said, unless it's a vintage card in an 8, 9, or 10, they're out there. They're not, unless it's a super rare card, which we all know exists. But unless it's something along those lines, you're going to have opportunities to make purchases at various times. Be focused, know what you're kind of looking for. Like you said, I love the wording you use, right? What you can live with and what you can't. Knowing yourself and what works for you or doesn't work for you is key. And you gotta, at the end of the day, right? You have to collect for yourself and what you like. You can ask some other people's opinion. Hey, what do you think of this card? What do you think when you look at it? What do you think? But at the end of the day, it's your money, it's your purchase. You have to be happy with. I think that's a great point. There's a lot to to learn there. One
At
thing.
the
Yeah, go
end,
ahead.
you have at the end. Yeah, you're the one that has to live with it, and of course, I get opinion. I mean, you want others' opinions, and you want what do they think because some of the people know better or know more, or maybe they see something that I don't see or know something I don't know about that card. But the bottom line is, I'll even pay over comps on some cards if I think that's really the one that I want. Because overall, John, I mean, forget the last 3 years, 2, 3 years. If you look back over 3 years ago, vintage cars are more expensive today than they were back
Oh
in
yeah,
2019, 2020. If you look investment wise, they're still good investments and they
yeah,
will keep going up from what I've seen and what you've seen over the years slowly, and you
yeah.
may get
It's the
jumps here or
safest.
there.
It's the safest when it comes to the hobby. Vintage is the safest play. The presses have stopped running, as we both know. They're not overproducing them. The every year there's less of them as maybe some get destroyed or that sort of thing. So I've really probably in the last 5 to 7 years, I've always collected vintage. I don't want to make it like a, but I've really, really focused to that side of the hobby in the last 5 to 7 years. I don't want to say exclusively, but probably 90% of the purchases I make. To the point now, even people come up to a table if I'm set up at a show and they'll say, "You buy in?" And one of my first questions is, do you have vintage? And if they kind of say, it depends. I don't know. If they say no, sometimes I'll still look, but a lot of times I'll be like, I'm just kind of in vintage mode today. So sometimes I won't even look. And, there could have been a deal to be had, but it's just that's where 90% of my focus is. So a lot of it's, how's the show going, how am I doing too? That's a factor. But, and I like to sell. I'm gonna be very honest. I like to sell that modern stuff and ultra modern stuff to buy vintage. It's just something I've done in the last probably 7 to 9 years more than ever before, and that's just where I'm going. For obvious reasons that we've all already talked about. I think for me, for you, for many others, I think that writing sort of on the wall to when you look at sort of where the hobby is today. Yeah, I know you have the whole Mantle run. I'm sure you enjoy every one of those cards, but which one's your favorite? It's probably like asking a parent to pick out their favorite child if they have more. For me, it's easy. I only have one son, so it's an easy answer. But which card does it for you the most? Maybe that's a better way to
For
ask the
me,
question.
it's the 53 tops. I just love the look of Mantle and how that portrait is drawn there. I just think that 53 top set is beautiful, and that mantle to me it also has especially the mantle I have has meaning because that's kind of the first big mantle card that I bought because I had some cards from the 60s, but that was the first card I ever bought from the 50s of Mantle. And I got that card raw. And, it was, to me, it was like, wow, I couldn't believe I had a card that old and I had a Mantle that beautiful. And, it took me a couple more years before I got another 50s Mantle. And that one, I just stared at it for so long. And then I did get it graded with PSA and it came out a PSA 6. And it's still one of the most favorite cards in my entire collection.
Yeah, I can't argue. 53 tops just as a set and the design is one of my when people ask me like favorite sets or favorite designs or look at the car, it's one of the first sets I mention is that 53 top
Yeah,
set. It just even today it kind of bridges cards we have today and the vintage cards of the past. It sort of melds both of those worlds with some artwork
yeah,
and close up photos and that sort of thing, which I'm a big fan of. Seeing that player. Two things you collect that I've gotten into, especially in recent years, is boxing cards and tickets.
yes,
Um, I'm trying to get more into tickets, but man, it's getting harder to as prices. I'm always bidding, but I never seem to win them.
yeah.
I do have a few. I did a show about tickets on Hobby Quick Hits Orlando, and I think it's people don't realize. We talk about scarcity. Think about tickets, right? They were just a vessel to get into a
Yes.
stadium arena to watch the game. You crumpled it, put it in your pocket. Many times it wound up in the garbage after you got home and the game was over. I saw the game, and many of those tickets didn't survive, right? Or didn't
Yeah.
survive in great shape. And we talk about the history of sports, right? That ticket is part of that history. Hey, that's the game. So and so did this. That's the
Yeah.
game. Hank Aaron hit number 7. Uh, a significant home run. There's so many things that can be along. It may even be something personal. Hey, that's the first Yankee game
Yeah,
I ever
I mean
went to.
it's funny because I really wasn't into tickets, but I'm a huge fan of sports, so I went to tons of sporting events and everything. And then when the Marlins were in town, I was season ticket holders for years, and I went to you name it. Any time I went somewhere and there was an event, a game, football, baseball, even hockey, I'd go, or basketball, I'd go. And I always kept my tickets, but how I got started really into the tickets was that I had a whole bunch of Marlin tickets, and I went to the World Series with my whole family. I had like 6 tickets for everybody, and like 4 of them, like my dad, my mom, and mine, and my wife. I kept those. The other people that went, my sister, I think her has hers, but I kind of shared that with a friend of mine, and he said, "Do you have Game 4 of the 2003 World Series?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I was there with the whole family. I got a bunch of those tickets." That's the game that Miguel Cabrera has hit his first home run against in the World Series against Roger Clemens. And the Yankees. It was that, and I said, "Yeah, I have those tickets." He said, "Well, those tickets are worth some money." And I'm like, you didn't realize that. I go back to check, and I found some no hitters that were pitched against the Marlins, or that the Marlins pitch, and I had tickets to those games. And so these are games that personally I attended, but they were important things happened. And I remember the event, but I didn't realize the ticket would be worth money. And that's kind of how I got into the little bit of the ticket collection stuff. It was just one of those things. You never know, and it happened through YouTube.
Yeah, and we talk about cards, right? Cards are viewed as collectibles. Hey, I'm going to keep this. I'm going to put it, especially today. I'm going to put it in a binder. I'm going to put it in a top loader. Tickets were never really viewed like that. They just were. A lot of times they don't even give them out now. Everything's digital. You can request a hard copy ticket from the box office if something does occur during the game and you want a memento of the event. But generally, tickets don't even exist in the way we used to know them when we were younger. And most people, myself included, you don't even think. You just, hey, game's over. It's in my pocket. You throw your clothes in the hamper. You empty your pockets. You keep your couple singles that your dollar bills. You put that in your wallet, and then the ticket finds its way into the recycling. The garbage. And people didn't keep them. Like, I got in the game. The game's over, and I don't need this anymore. So I talk about sort of that, but now that's sort of catching up to me, because as I try to acquire some of these tickets, especially on the Jackie Robinson side
Oh,
of
forget
things.
it.
Yeah,
Jackie
it's tricky.
Robinson, anything with Jackie nowadays
Yeah,
is just gotten
yeah,
out of control, and especially important games. I mean,
yeah,
and not just
yeah,
Jackie, but any player,
yeah,
Mantle, or really, you think about any big name player in any event that they made, that they hit a big home run, or a World Series game where Don Larson pitched a perfect game. Any of that stuff is just people realize now that it's very limited, and they're not going to be producing tickets anymore. That's really the future. Everything is so digital right now that I just can't see that. I went to
yeah.
the
It's
one of the Miami Heat games, one of the playoff games, and we had to print out our tickets on the printer. That's all I had. I didn't even have anything. It was either on your phone or you can print
yeah.
it on your printer at home. Well, what good is that? What kind of ticket is that?
Yep, or season ticket holders will even just get like a lanyard that gets scanned for each game. One tip or word of advice, I kind of mentioned it already, But if you are at a game where something of significance happens, or you just, hey, I want an actual ticket so I can show, hey, I was at this game. You can go to the box office and get that printed. They won't do it for you without you asking, but they can do it by request. So if that's something you do want, your first game, it may not even be like a no-hitter or, hey, this is my first game ever, or my son's first game, or my daughter. You can request that hard copy ticket. They'll print it for you. It'll look like the tickets you're kind of accustomed. They just don't do them just normally. You have to actually request it, but you can still get them. But they're not going to give them to you just for the sake.
It's a special order. Yeah.
Yeah. So just for those that wonder, how can I get one? You have to go to the box office after the game or contact the team, and they'll get that to you. Orlando, man, I had fun chopping up some hobby with you. I hope to have you back for a future episode. But as always, I give the guests kind of the final word, where people can find your YouTube channel, anything, social media, anything you want to share. And like I said, if you haven't seen Orlando's stuff, many have with Tooth and Butt. The way you do it is just great. And like I said, probably no better ambassador or advocate for the hobby and sports in general. So share all that information for those listening.
Thank you, John. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. I truly appreciate everything that you've done for the hobby. Writing the articles that you do, the podcasts that you do, just maintaining Jefferson Burdick's grave site, and you even bought a piece of Mickey Mantle's house. So that's great to hear. So,
that's the least out of all those things. That's probably the
I know,
the least. But listen,
as a Mantle fan, I had to mention that one.
No, it is cool. I'm not gonna lie, but it is a pretty cool thing. I'm coming from you, Orlando. I appreciate that. It means all the more to me because I think you epitomize what's great with the hobby. And so getting your sort of stamp of approval, all the more better. But this is about you, so give out your social.
Yeah, the only place you're going to find me is on YouTube, A Collector's Dream. And if you want to reach me, you could send me an email, and it's acollectorsdreamco@gmail.com. But check me out at A Collector's Dream. It's A Collector's Dream. That's it, on YouTube. And in the description, you'll see my email and contact information if you need to reach me.
Well, Orlando, you don't need me to tell you this, man. Keep up the great content. You're educating as much as anyone in the hobby. I think education in the hobby is like we discussed. I think there's not enough of it. I think there needs to be more, and you're leading sort of by example. I've tried to do a little bit. As much as I can, but I think you do a better job yourself, and so very important. And keep up that great work.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
And well, I love to have you back on. We could have probably did another. Well, me and you get together, we probably could have done a 3-hour show.
Anytime, you just let me know. It'll be a pleasure.
All right. Great catching up with Orlando. Kind of admired him and his content from afar. Got to meet him in Chicago at the National, like I said, and said, "Hey, man, gotta have you on." And there it was. And we talked off the air. We could have did a 3-hour show. So we'll definitely get him back on and catch up. I had a few more things on my list that we didn't even get to. So look for him hopefully in a future Sports Card Nation episode. But thanks again for him for coming on. We're going to get our Hobby is the People announcer and some closing thoughts, and we'll wrap up this episode.
Time for our Hobby is the People announcer of the week.
Hey there, this is John Keating from That 70s Card Show with a friendly reminder that the hobby is the people.
If you'd like to be the Hobby is the People announcer of the week,
Do a WAV or MP3 file and send it to sportscardnationpc@gmail.com.
That's a wrap for this week. Huge thanks to you, the listeners out there, because without you, there is no us. If you like the show, we truly appreciate positive reviews. Big ups to our great guests who drive the show and our awesome sponsors who make it all possible. Sports Card Nation will be back next week, but don't forget to catch either Hobby Quick Hits or Card Mentions coming up on Monday. I'll leave you with this. How do we change the world? One random act of kindness at a time. Remember, the hobby is the people.
For nearly 50 years, Sports Collectors Digest has been the voice of the hobby, bringing you comprehensive coverage of the sports collectible industry. From industry news, auction results, market analysis, and in-depth stories about collectors and their collections, Sports Collectors Digest has everything you need to know about the hobby. SCD is also your leading source for listings of sports collectible dealers, card shops, card shows, and the latest from the industry's top companies. To check out all the latest news or to subscribe to the hobby's oldest magazine, visit sportscollectorsdigest.com or call 1-800-829-5561.
Hobby News Daily is your homepage of the hobby, providing original writing, exclusive gem rate data, a daily morning minute podcast, and some of the best content creators in the hobby. Remember, hobbynewsdaily.com and @Hobby News Daily on social. Happy collecting!